Hi, I'm Karen Burniston, here to teach a pop and cuts technique. This is the new multi-tier platform with an add-on technique for adding a spiral to the front. And in this case, I'm going to cut it out of a clear material so that all of that mechanism disappears. I'm going to use these 4 dies from my collection, including the brand new multi-tier insert from the Snippets collection, and you can get buying info on Sizzix.com. Okay, I am using the square pop and cut space with the multi-tier insert, and I just need to align the tick marks. Now what I'm going to do first is I'm going to show how to cut this spiral, make this little technique using just plain cardstock, and that way it'll be much easier to see on the video. Pop and cuts cards are always integrated cards, which means the pop-up is just cut right into the card, just like the outer edges. And now all I have to do is work the fold. So with the multi-tier, you're looking for that big fold across the back. That's kind of your shelf fold. And you can go right there and bring that into the card. And then start looking for the turn down spot. So there is the little fold that turns that box downward. And then I'll go to the bottom and I'll just pinch the fold where the multi-tier touches the floor. And I also have those 2 tall tiers. But once I get to this position, I should be able to just fold the card closed to really work those folds. And now you see what I've got. There are 2 optional tiers at the top and the bottom. I like to call those little guys little chunkies. In the folded position, if you bend that thing over and then press it to come into the card, it's very easy to train. So in the folded position, I give it a good pinch, unfold, and then press it to come into the card. And then from there, I should be able just to fold the card closed again. So now you can see all of the tiers that are available on this die. Now for making the spiral, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pierce a hole kind of in the upper left corner there, just enough to get my scissors in. And now I am just going to freehand cut myself a spiral. I could do this in a circle shape, but for my card today, I think I'm just going to follow the square shape that's on the front of that platform. I need to be up a little bit higher than my little chunky at the bottom so that it will stay connected. And from here, I am just going to take my scissors right around that thing, cutting it into a spiral. I really don't have to worry about it being perfect because every time the card is opened, the spiral is expanded. Now to attach the spiral to the card, what you need is a little mini glue dot just in the center of the spiral. And then you always want to attach a spiral in the closed position. So what I mean by that is you flatten the card, that way you know everything folds flat, and you give it a good press. And now you can see what happens. As the card is opened, the spiral will expand, and you can add things to that spiral and they will pop up as well. For clear pop and cuts creations, you're going to want a clear material that can still bend, so something that can still fold and unfold. So I'm going to use write-on transparencies from the office supply store. So I just repeated the same steps using those write-on transparencies instead of the cardstock to make the exact same thing. We're going to need a backing card, and the pop and cut spaces always cut plain cards when you do not have an insert in them. So in this case, I've added some thick black cardstock onto the pop and cut space die with nothing in it and ran it through the Big Shot machine. And now I'll fold that in half and make myself that backing card. For the pattern paper inside the card, I already pre-cut my width of my paper a little bit less wide than the card. So the card is a 5-inch card. I cut it at 4 3/4. And then I'm going to put the fold of the card a little bit higher than those tick marks. So you can kind of see where my thumb is there. I just went up a little bit from the tick marks, put my folded piece of paper on the die with no insert in it, and run it through. And what it'll do is it will make a card that still has the decorative edge, but it's shorter. So then I get that little black border all the way around. The other decoration that I wanted inside the card was a spooky tree. And so what I did is I freehand cut a brown cardstock trunk, and then I used the twigs on the edge die from Tim Holtz's collection to add all the branches to the top. Now when attaching a clear card inside a card, you have to be strategic with your adhesive placement. You can use something that either is clear or dries clear, but my favorite thing to do is to use staples. And what I do, in this case it was perfect because all of those words, those Halloween words, I could sink a staple in the vertical sections of those words and then just highlight those staples with a black Sharpie afterwards, and then they would just disappear. But you could use strategically placed brads. If you're going to use adhesive like a tacky tape or some glue dots, I would just strategically place those where an embellishment will cover them later. I had another section of that on the edge twigs die, and so I put that on that top tier. It kind of gives the tree more dimension. You can see it from the side there. You can watch me assemble the flagpole in some of the other videos, but for this one I wanted to keep the length down. So just know that I took those pieces and assembled a lantern, including the little lantern glass, which I stamped with the spider web, and I also hung a stamped spider off of one of the little crossbars. I had a piece of pattern paper that I was going to use on the front of the card that was just perfect. It has these black cats inside these jack-o'-lanterns, so I fussy cut some of those, just added a glue dot to the front of the platforms where I wanted them to go, and put them on the card. The spiral becomes essentially another platform that things can be attached to, and my original concept for this card was just to have some bats flying in the air, but then I saw this ghost I've kind of had in my stash for a long time, stamped it on vellum and fussy cut it out, and then because the ghost is so large, you saw me opening and closing the card a couple times, I just had to make sure I chose a position where it would be hidden when the card was closed. And then I went ahead and used a staple to hold the ghost to the spiral, but of course I could have used a glue dot or some clear glue as well. The other thing the spiral works great for is to lift up a greeting. So in this case, I made a little tab at the bottom of my little greeting, and then I'm going to attach it with that little tab. But the top of the 31 label is over the spiral. So what happens is it will collapse and fold down, but then when the spiral lifts, it also lifts up the greeting. To finish out this card's interior, all I did is added a couple little fussy cut bats. I had stamped those onto yellow cardstock and cut them out, and then one more of those little cats in the pumpkins. For the front of the card, I'm going to use one of the new stitched framelit sets, and my first step is going to be to cut out my stamped greeting using one of the solid framelits. So in that case, it's just a sandwich of cutting pads on the magnetic platform. And then when that comes out, then I've cut my solid, and now I want to do the stitch lines. I've got to go down a tab onto tab 1 with the multi-purpose platform, and then I'm going to put the silicone and impressions on the bottom, the label face down, the die stitch lines down on the back, and then I'm going to tape that into place. Now, I'm no longer on a magnetic platform, so it is going to want to shift. You will want to tape it into place. Then a cutting pad on top, roll that back through the Big Shot machine. So since I did the two-step process, what I will get is a raised embossed stitch. Now the raised stitch lines are going to look great even if you just leave the label plain, but where they really show up is if you hit them with a little bit of ink. So all I'm doing here is I've just taken a distress tool and added some black ink to the little sponge and then just brush that all the way around the label to highlight those stitches. Now before I attach that label to the front of my card, I first added a little ribbon bow and a black plastic spider that I used a brad to adhere. I also used the pattern paper on the front of the card to hide a couple magnets. That way the card will keep itself closed since it is rather bulky on the inside. You can see all of the layers of dimension using that clear insert plus the spiral addition. If you've enjoyed this tutorial, I hope that you will subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can always find more ideas on my blog, KarenBurniston.com. Thanks for watching.